Thank you for having me. This is obviously a story that is quite close to home with obviously how to get into Paralympics, and it's obviously opened so many doors for me, hence why I'm so busy today, being my third talk of the day. But thank you all for coming, and I hope you get a lot out of it. And yeah, anything that I don't touch on, obviously I'll be leaving some time for questions at the end of the session as well. But this is just an overview of what I'm going to discuss. What is this DSA, so Disability Sports Australia? What do we do? What is adaptive sport? What is my story involving adaptive sport, and how did I get into it? And what's the right sport for you, as well as how to advocate for yourself as well. So if we go on to the next slide. So I'm here obviously as a Paralympian, but I'm also representing an organisation that is really close to my heart. They've done some incredible work, and I've been really honoured to be a part of it. So Disability Sports Australia is a charity, and it's a national sporting organisation for people with disabilities. So what that means is there's 9 of us national organisations that focus on sports opportunities for people with a disability. For us, our vision is to create active lives for all Australians with disability. And our mission to do that is to enable more Australians with disabilities to be more active more often. So we are focused on the participation pathways and helping people find ways to get into sport to stay active. So at Disability Sports Australia, we like to do that. We connect Australians with disabilities to local sporting recreation opportunities. And I'm hoping from this presentation today that you'll get some information about how to do that. But before we talk about how to, if you go to the next slide. So these are just some barriers to participation that we've found at Disability Sports Australia that do sometimes make it a bit harder for people to get involved. Personal barriers for a lot of people is low self-esteem and confidence, fear of injuries, especially with disabilities. Limited opportunities and programs. So at Disability Sports Australia, we're advocating for more programs. And I'll talk about some of the programs we've introduced a bit later, like our Abilities Unleashed program. So we'll touch on those. Training and coaching, not enough access to programs to educate the community. As well as accessibility issues, lack of venues, and lack of awareness as well. So what is a disability, and how can we adapt sports around disabilities to get people more involved? So if we go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, what is adaptive sport? Adaptive sport is a way to keep everyone with a disability involved in sport at any sort of level. So it has a lot of benefits for people with disability, and that's why I'm such a big advocate for adaptive sports, and not necessarily just sports, but also recreational opportunities as well. That isn't just about like competitiveness, but it's about fitness and enhancing daily life and physical functions as well. So So I'm just going to go through some of the ideas here of what a disabled sport is. So adaptive sport is adapting a sport to allow for different disabilities to become involved. So for instance, we've got some examples of sports on the screen. Vision, if you look under the picture where it says visual story, we've got a lot of different balls available to people that can't see the ball. So if we're talking about soccer balls, you can see the boy next to the photo of the soccer goal. We've actually got balls like AFL balls, but specifically the one at the bottom that have sounds in them that make it easier for people with vision impairments to hear the ball, creating different opportunities for them to be able to get into ball sports. We've also got different types of equipment to get people engaged in recreational. So we've got a picture of our frame runner over here, which is another way for people with lower limb weakness who can still move their legs to still be able to feel the sensation of running. So a frame runner helps people run that may not be able to support their full weight. And of course, adapting mainstream sports as well. So badminton is obviously a really fun sport, but sometimes the fast pace of the shuttlecock can be a little bit hard to play properly if you have lower motor skills or just need that extra support. So we find using things like balloons slow down the pace of the badminton game and allow everyone to access it in a fun way. So there's heaps of different ways you can adapt sport, whether that's balls with sounds in them, whether that's a beeping sound or a bell, different equipment to still participate in running, as well as modifying the game with a balloon instead of a shuttlecock. There's heaps of different ways to stay active. And it's about finding the sport for you. So I'm hoping we can discuss a few options throughout this presentation as well. So if we go to the next slide, I spoke about adaptive sport and how adaptive sport can get people engaged and be a part of a community, and is about connecting with your community as well. But there's so much more than that. You can obviously pursue Paralympic sports to professional levels. For me, I've been really lucky. I've competed at 3 games, as was alluded to earlier. I competed at the Rio 2016 Paralympic Games in javelin. I then competed in alpine skiing, which you can see in the middle, in Beijing 2022 Paralympic Games. And then I was recently picked up by the Para Matildas. So we're another Football Australia team, like the Matildas, but for people with disabilities. So who am I? So as I mentioned, all those sports. I got into Rio through a chance meeting, and if it wasn't through meeting a Paralympian at a sports a school trip to the AIS, I wouldn't have found out about parasports. So having these sorts of days, I find information sessions like today, I find really important because for me, I didn't know about parasports. So I competed, as I said, in Rio in javelin and discus. And then after my event, I found out that javelin was no longer going to be in a Paralympic program. So I competed in Rio and I came 5th, and I was on track to do really well and win a medal in Tokyo, as I was just a junior in the javelin in 2016. But javelin was taken out of Tokyo, so I had to reassess and decide what I was going to do from there. From another chance meeting, I met the head coach of the Australian Para Alpine ski team on a family trip down at the snow. I'd been around skiing my whole life. All my dad's mates were ski instructors. So for me, I love skiing, and for me to be scouted by them, they were really excited because I had that high performance sport experience, and also already knew how to ski. So they just had to teach me how to race. So from there, they offered me a lot of scholarships because they thought it was an awesome way to transition me from athletics to alpine skiing. I took the opportunity in skiing. It was a sport that I absolutely loved and always wanted to compete in, but never thought I'd have the opportunity until I found para sports. So I was taken overseas in 2017, competed over in America and Austria through the European and Northern American circuits from 2019 to 2022. Had a lot of setbacks, a few concussions, a few broken elbows, things like that, and finally qualified and became the second female in Australia to compete at a summer and winter games. So I competed in slalom, which is going down the hill through the gates, which I'll show you in a minute, and came 7th in my event. So wasn't even expected to qualify. So to do so well, I'm pretty proud. From there, I came home from the Winter Games in March of 2022. I had competed in able-bodied football as a child, and during my off seasons from alpine skiing, I would kick around with some Football New South Wales athletes. And when I got back from the Beijing Winter Paralympic Games, they sent me an email asking me to trial for the Para Matildas team, a new team that they just started in April of 2022. I was asked to trial, and I made the team, where we were selected in April, and we flew out on the 2nd of May to become runners-up at the first ever Women's Para Football World Cup. So it's a little bit about my sporting journey. We have got the World Cup coming up in a week, which is why we've got so many talks on at the moment. We're promoting, obviously, the Paralympics that was just on, but the World Cup coming up as well. But I keep mentioning para sports. So if we go to the next slide, Why am I a Paralympian? Obviously, you can't really see me behind the screen, but I have, and bear with me because it's a mouthful, left-sided hemiplegic spastic dystonic cerebral palsy. Long word, a long diagnosis, but basically it affects my whole left side. I have tight muscles, which make the dystonia makes them do funny movements, so I can't move my left hand. I can't rotate it. Same with my leg. I haven't got that much movement in my leg, and that much. It's a little bit weaker and tighter than the average person's arm and leg. So it affects from my shoulder all the way down to my toes. In Australia, just to give you some statistics about how common cerebral palsy is, about 34,000 people have cerebral palsy, and that's about 2 per 1,000 live births. So because of my disability, I'm obviously eligible to be a Paralympian. And through parasports, we adapt rules for the sport. But are you still there? Yeah. We adapt the sporting rules. So obviously we have modified rules for, say, soccer, where we play in a smaller field with less athletes on each team. But we can also modify the equipment, as I mentioned earlier, with a balloon for badminton or bells in balls for soccer for vision impairment. So for me, in alpine skiing, I would use the guard that you can see on my hand in this photo where I'm hugging one of my sponsors. So that guard becomes my shield. So in alpine skiing, you would ski with poles in slalom that have guards over your hands so that you can ski towards the gate and punch the gates out of the way. Because I can't hold a pole in my left hand, I use a modified piece of equipment that's made out of carbon fiber. So that's the same material that they use to make prosthetic legs. So it's really, really strong, really, really expensive, but it protects my arm when I punch the gates out of the way. In soccer, I have a similar prosthetic. It's called an AFO, so foot and ankle orthotic, that you can also see in the picture here. So I use that when I'm playing soccer, and that becomes my ankle. So because of my cerebral palsy, I've got drop foot, and this brace helps lift up my foot for me, so I'm able to play at my best ability. So if we go to the next slide. So growing up with CP, as I mentioned, I have cerebral palsy. I had serial castings, so that basically means they'll cast my leg and my hand in a way that it will stretch the muscles every week to try and get more movement out of my calf and my ankle. I also had surgeries 2002, 5, and 7. I'm a little bit old now, so if you can do the math, that was in primary school. Basically restructuring my leg and putting it back on. Botox isn't just for your face. I also had a lot of that just to try and get muscle movement in my arm as well. So I didn't get to participate in organised sport or local sport until year 3 after my final surgery in 2007. So it was my first taste of sport, and I absolutely loved it. And obviously, it was soccer, my first love. The team environment, the game, and everything about the achievements and being part of a community was something that I was really passionate about. So once I had that first taste, I was hooked. We go to the next one. So goal setting is something that has been really important for me as a child. I started setting goals really young, and the goals that I was setting were creating incredible opportunities for me to pursue them, and vice versa. Sport became an avenue for me to have these opportunities to create goals. So as a child, I had quite a few goals. They were to be a school sports captain, to study a language overseas, and to compete for Australia in soccer. Mum actually found a diary of mine when I was in primary school that said I wanted to compete for Australia in soccer. And I think for me as a naive little kid, not understanding just quite the concept of having cerebral palsy and how that would limit my opportunities to get into high performance sport, little did we know that Paralympic sport has created avenues for a little 10-year-old to compete at a Paralympic level in para football. So yeah, through my love of sport, I found this avenue of being able to create goals and have these incredible opportunities to have successes. So I think the biggest thing for me I found as a child was to set big goals and have ways or a vision on how to achieve them. So if we go to the next slide. So I obviously had a goal of competing for Australia in soccer, and that was my goal, my obsession, my love. But that's because I found soccer, and that was the right sport for me. That was the sport that I ultimately fell back into so many years later when I joined the Para Matildas. So there are so many different sports that we can get involved in with disabilities. Um, I'm thinking, so if we go, so this is some of the adaptive sports organisations that we have on our website. So if you go to our website at Disability Sports Australia, you can see the website link on the bottom. If you type in www.sports.org.au/get active, these are some of our other national sporting organisations that I mentioned earlier. Sports inclusion is for people with autism or intellectual disabilities, and Riding for the Disabled also offers some great opportunities to get into horse riding. Paralympics Australia is obviously our partner. They do more high performance side of Paralympic sports. And also there's a few other organisations on there that you can have a look at. If we go to the next slide. So you still there? Whoa. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you.
Perfect. I look like you left. Um, as I mentioned, I was found and brought into sport. So if it wasn't for having people around me that saw the potential in me and knew that there was Paralympic sports, I wouldn't have known about the opportunities in parasports. But luckily, Disability Sports Australia have started creating opportunities for people to get into sport and be more active more often sooner. So one of our flag programs that I'm in love with. It's something that I've seen be developed from 4 days across New South Wales to becoming national. So it's our Abilities Unleashed program for kids and adults. So we have a kids day and an adults day. And this day goes from 10 to 1, where you can try several sports in your local community. So if you check out our website, again, www.abilitiesunleashed.com.au, there's days all across Australia, which will allow you to come and try some sports on the day. And these sports aren't just about trying them and leaving after the day. These sports are modified sports and they're local to your community. So we try to aim to have sports on the day that have an ongoing program, that have adaptive opportunities for you to stay active after the day as well. So if you check out our website, we have adults days, and then we have a kids program too that is open to schools to participate as well. So you can bring your school if you have multiple people at your school with disabilities. We also have another program that we're doing with Paralympics Australia called the Tri Para Sports. So the Tri Para Sports is much like our adults and kids days, except for we have sports that are more specific to the Paralympic Games. So as I mentioned, as a kid, I loved soccer, but there wasn't a program for people with disabilities or cerebral palsy specifically to pursue international level until 2 years ago. And these tri-para sports are specific to sports that have got a Paralympic pathway. So not all sports are Paralympic pathways, but there's still ways to get involved at a local level. So the Abilities Unleashed days are focused on those recreational and local level sports. If we go to the next slide. So, whoops. So another program that Paralympics Australia have asked us to tell you about is the Start Line program. So it's another way for you to get online and start your journey. So it will identify national networks for you to get involved with. So if you again go onto www.paralympics.org.au / the Start Line, it has all the information you need to know about sports that have got Paralympic pathways and that are supported by Paralympics Australia to pursue to international levels as well. We go to the next slide. So another big thing that I wanted to discuss is the ability to advocate for yourself and the opportunities in your community, and not just for yourself, but for people that you might know in the community that have a disability. So a program that we're really proud of at Disability Sports Australia is the Accessible Champions course. So this was created in conjunction with the Australian Sports Commission, and it's a free online course that helps clubs and leisure providers to become more accessible. So it was created with Paralympians. A lot of them are my teammates from Rio and Beijing. And it identifies, upskills and supports local clubs to find ways that they can become more inclusive. So the key learning outcomes, obviously removing fear of how to talk about disability, what is disability, as well as creating a foundational understanding of what disability is. It also has information on simple steps to become more accessible as a destination. And then we don't want the sports organizations to be left after the program. We want them to still stay involved and feel connected. So there's some ongoing resources that they can still access after the program. So I highly recommend, if you have a club in mind, to let them know about it so they have the information that they need to know how to be more inclusive as well. But also, we've had a lot of, some of my teammates in the past have had clubs not sure on how to be accessible for them and how to get them involved. So to have that ability and that confidence to be able to look into your community and support yourself with information that we have at Disability Sports Australia, I think is a really great way to become more included in your community as well. So we go to the next slide. So that's it from me. I do have a few videos, but I'm not sure if they were working just about the program. But I think if we leave it there, we've got more time to have a bit of a Q&A as well. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you get a little bit out of my presentation, but certainly make sure you ask questions, because that's the easiest way to make sure you're getting the information you need. So thank you so much for having me, Mable.
Thank you, Rae. What we can do is we can send the videos out in the email tomorrow. So I'll send an email tomorrow, which will have a recording of the session, and I'll pop the videos in there as well, just in case anyone wants to have a watch at another time.
Awesome. Do we have questions coming through?
Hey, Jodie, do you have a question? We also do have a, oh, there you go. Jodie wants to know, how often are the Para Games?
Yeah, so the Paralympic 4 years, like the Olympics. So we run 2 weeks after the Olympics as a standalone event. But each sport also has their own international program. So we'll have a World Cup this year for the Para Matildas, and then every other sport has their own World Cup circuit. So whether that is a World Cup or a World Championships, usually World Championships are every 2 years, alternating with the Paralympics. So there's a lot of international events that one, you can get involved in participating in or competing in, but you can also watch online as well, which is really exciting.
The next question we have is, do you know if 10-pin bowling is included?
So 10 pin bowling has got a really big program internationally. They've got a lot of programs for intellectual disabilities and autism. I don't believe there's too many international or competitions for people with disabilities, but there's a lot of local opportunities. So check out our website. We have got a link to 10 Pin Bowling Australia, and they have all the information you need about inclusive centres, I believe they'd be called, and how to get involved in competitions as well.
Nice. And then a question from Nadine around what was your experience playing in mainstream sport when you were younger?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, didn't get into mainstream sport until I was in year 3 or 4. So I do miss those few years of participation as a younger child because of my surgery. So for me, I absolutely loved it. I loved being a part of the community and having a team. For me, as I got a bit older and more self-aware of my disability, it obviously got a little bit harder, knowing that I couldn't run or compete at the same sort of level. And it wasn't until I learnt about modifications, even something as simple as in athletics, we have different weight classifications. So being able to use a different weight throughout high school meant that I was still doing like good distances, but also then being able to compete at an international level as well.
We have a question from Michael, and he says, does the Australian Institute of Sport help people or support para athletes?
Yeah, so the Australian Institute of Sport is obviously really invested in sport across Australia, but whether that's Olympic or Paralympic. So as of Tokyo, Paralympic athletes have been receiving the same amount of funding as Olympic athletes. So when we talked about the medal bonus, that medal bonus for Paralympians is being paid by the Australian government. But as far as ongoing funding for training and everyday living expenses, they've been the same for the same amount of years, probably even a bit longer, through the AIS. So the Australian Institute of Sport has funding from the government, and that is equally distributed between Olympians and Paralympians. So it's a really good sign for Paralympic sport in Australia and certainly internationally, where Paralympic athletes are being given the same recognition as their Olympic counterparts.
Nice. We have a question from Claire, and she says wheelchair sports in New South Wales is a great introduction to adaptive sports for all ages. My son plays wheelchair basketball. There is a misconception that only wheelchair users can come along, but anyone can come and play. Have you heard of the term reverse inclusion?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I myself am a standing athlete. As I mentioned a bit earlier, I did have an injury, an elbow injury, and that was actually from playing wheelchair basketball. So even though I'm a standing Paralympian, I've competed in athletics and alpine skiing, I do enjoy playing wheelchair basketball as a recreational sport, and also.
Uh-oh. I think we just lost her, which is very unfortunate. But we do have Maddie here from DSA. So maybe we'll ask her and see if she can answer the next question. If you know, hopefully you do, Maddie, how do we find out about potential scholarships?
Yeah, so there's places like Sports Access Foundation that do a lot of like grants and sometimes one-on-one mentoring as well, where Paralympians can come through and then mentor those coming up. So that's a good place to look at. Then it's also just your local governments, your council, sometimes they've got money as well to help. So it's just finding what works for you in your local area for that.
We do have a question from Manda. I just don't know. I think it was more directed at Rae, but let's give it a go and see. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I even like speaking on Rae's behalf of that, I'm unsure. I know the system changes pretty much too much. in the disability sector for sports, especially in schools. So yeah, I'm going to assume it was quite different back when she was coming through. So apologies. I don't think we can, well, I can't answer your question, unfortunately. That's okay. But feel free, I'm going to copy it and maybe I'll give it to Rae and see if she's got any pointers or tips that we can get back to you.
Yeah, well, we'll take that one and get back to you, Amanda, on that one. And look, Claire has very helpfully posted a link there to some of the grants and funding that's available for para champions. Any more questions?
There's a few, like I really like the reverse inclusion and everything as well that Claire mentioned. There's lots of sports that do this. There's even wheelchair AFL that do that, where you're on a team and you do have to have a certain amount of people with disability on the field or court at the same time. But that's just like any other sport. You know, you got your mixed netballs where you have to have a certain amount of boys and girls. And that's a really good way of reverse inclusion as well. Even, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. The Abilities Unleashed events that we run as well, they are aimed for people with disabilities, but obviously we want to make them a very like just inclusive space. So we do have people that say their son wants to come, but can their daughter that doesn't have a disability come, so that they're not alone and they have a friend, and we're more than welcome to accommodate that too. So yeah, we're definitely working in that space as well.
Great. Thank you, Maddie, and thanks to Rae as well. Really great to hear both your perspectives and find out more ways that people can access sports. We're going to send out a survey tomorrow, so I'd be really grateful if you could just give us your feedback, and more importantly, let us know what subjects you'd like to hear from. Like, we really are trying to make this a monthly event and give people opportunities to learn a bit more about certain things in the community. So please fill that out. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for joining too.
Bye.